Let's start. Hello and welcome to the Tilted Bro podcast. Guess what? We're really good. More importantly, I'm really good. And I didn't bring my mic cord. So we're down to one mic today.
Yes.
Anyway, it's sorry it won't sound as crisp as it usually does, but I'm going to do the best I can in post.
That's true. But yes. Hi, my name is Francisco. I was supposed to say I'm Marshall.
What? You got to try to... By confusing everybody, I think you've confused me.
I'm Francisco, and this...
And I am Marshall,
Yes.
and we are your podcast masters for today and for next week. Well, not tomorrow. Unless you're watching this the day after it comes out, or you decide to rewatch this again. And in fact, it has been tomorrow.
You're just further confusing the audience.
Exactly.
We're working in tandem here. I like this.
I like this. It's working. So, before we begin,
Yes.
I want to get slightly off topic before we even get on topic, which is that I am making the call out to the unhealthy habits of Francisco.
All right.
This man, I see him going to too many fast food restaurants. You gotta stop.
Well, listen. When you're on the road all the time, doing things that you need to do, and you can't really stop at restaurants.
You're not on the road. You don't even have a car to your name.
I technically do. It just doesn't
It
work.
doesn't work. He has no operating car to his name.
But my unhealthy eating habits are not the topic of today.
No, but I need a call out. This is my note to everybody. Get on you to eat better.
I'm just saying.
Somebody's calling me. Go away.
I'm just saying, eating a burger for lunch and then eating a burger for dinner, there's nothing wrong with that.
I think there is many things wrong with that.
For people who can't eat red meat all day. However, I'm not one of those people. So
You develop problems of eating red meat by eating too much red meat,
I'll cross that bridge when I die to it.
which could be next week at this rate.
Well, then I would have lived a good life. But other than that, we're here to talk about
need
a
you, man.
certain article.
Who else am I going to do a podcast with? And that's what the article is. What to do when your podcast partner dies of a heart attack? No, it's not. Okay, so what was the article name?
The article's name is Roleplaying 101, Character Identity. It's written by the ever great James Hayek. I pronounced it James Heck yesterday.
Yeah, because it's a heckin' good article.
It is, man. He's written some other articles. You can find his article on D&D Beyond. It should be right on the front page. And
Maybe when this comes out, maybe not. But we'll put a link in the description.
just for you. But this article is to help people kind of mold who they want to be in a D&D campaign. Because for when you're doing regular character creations, and we dove into it in our character creation podcast,
Yeah.
we address the topic of backgrounds and having all that fun jazz, personality traits, ideals, bonds, flaws.
Mhm.
This goes beyond that into a term that Marshall particularly likes, the fantasy you.
You. Yes. The idea, because actually what's funny for me, and the reason I was intrigued by that, was, like, I feel like the easy trope to, like, think about when you think of, like, oh, I'm going to make a character, or, like, hey, they're making a character, like, and, like, oh, it's just going to be them, right? It's just going to be whoever, like, it's just going to be the fantasy version of you. And what's funny, because for me, like, I've never been able to do that, because I think anytime I've thought about, like, if I was just thrown into the world of D&D, and, like, I just thought of, like, I want to be a character that's exactly like me, I can never think of any class that would involve. Say we just, like, went simple, and you just had to make it a human.
Yeah.
But since you're a human, you just pick the human, but the fantasy class version of you. I cannot do that for the life of me. Because we're kind of in the planning stages of that for a campaign that we do here in the store.
Yes.
Which, by the way, we're back. Shout out,
This is
logo.
a store. Yeah.
But the thing about that is, like, so kind of the idea that we're almost thinking about is, like, that we're playing just kind of us, and now we've just with our knowledge of D&D in a modern setting, we'll be essentially kind of becoming the classes that we would be, or that we would be almost suited for. And what's funny to me is kind of the idea of like, well, I don't know what that is. And I've had this question for years. But what's funny is I do know that a lot of people actually do this. Like most people, that's their first idea.
Oh yeah,
Is to just go based on who they are.
pretty much. And I believe it was Jared. You gotta have that Pro Jared.
Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Jared Knappenbauer.
I'm gonna trust your logic on that one.
I've heard it enough.
Okay.
And trust me, I didn't know at all how to pronounce Pro Jared's
Yeah.
name until I finally. Most actually, it was until I watched. First, it was DCA.
Dice Camera Actions.
yeah.
For those who don't know.
Then, because I've heard Chris Perkins say it. But then otherwise, I've also seen other shows where people have said it. So.
True. But yeah, in an interview, ironically with D&D Beyond, he mentioned that for what he thinks a good character or a good role player should know is to put a little bit of themselves into the character. However, the key term to that is a little bit. If you go full on now and just insert yourself into the campaign, well, yes, it can be done. It might kind of stop you from doing certain things because then you're like, these guys see this character as just me. So if I mess up here, then what are they going to think of me? And that just hinders the whole creative process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there is a very creative way to do who I am as a fantasy character. I'm gonna slightly shift this here actually. Well, that sounded good. Probably.
Oh yeah. And by the way, right now you're probably
There we go.
seeing
It's probably just slightly the pattern is just probably better now.
Oh yeah. You're probably right now. A little just side note. You're probably just wondering the background here. For those who haven't seen the past podcasts, or for those who attempted to see one
Yes.
podcast, where we got the camera.
The one time we did record here last, the camera had no batteries.
Yes.
So,
Marshall.
no, actually, what was it? I think what it was is I forgot my SD cards.
Yes, you forgot your SD card.
Yeah.
Yes. But yes, that's relevant now because
Yeah.
now we're recording. This is actually Lake Geneva Games, located
The
in the
visual.
lovely Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Many would know this to be the birthplace of D&D, or highly regarded as such, because this is where Geir Gygax made the concept for it.
Yep, and then eventually, pretty much mainly lived and died.
Yeah, essentially.
Which is pretty great.
Oh, yeah.
Special historical areas.
And I live around the area. Marshall is coming from afar, and
Yes.
working here.
I traveled to get here.
Yes. Most of the people who work here, or not in the store in particular, in the area, some of the older people have known the Gygaxes, from Gary to his son Ernie, and so on and so forth. So it's really cool to be able to be in this location and do all that. And Lake Geneva Games has graciously allowed us to film here.
But going back on the topic
Yes.
here, so while it can be it can be done creatively to be able to make put you into the D&D space and to put you into the fantasy world. A really big kind of reality to it is that when you kind of put yourself into the game, you really it's not even the fact that you just think of well, what are they going to think of me? But it's just more of it's what I do. It's the reason I've been unable to make a fantasy version of me for forever. And it's that you get in your own head really easily. So you start to overthink because and then player versus character knowledge starts to become also very blurred. Because it's easy to think what I would do, in this situation because it's me. But does your character actually know that? It may be based off of your personality, but does your character actually know that? And it's really easy to blur the line between the, player and character knowledge because you think your character knows everything you know. Problem is they don't.
No.
Just because your character has your personalities, that doesn't mean they know how flanking works.
That's true.
It's kind of that, and that's something that can be very hard to deter from. So to me, I always look at it, and the article kind of references this idea of trying to get away from the fantasy you as much as possible or as soon as possible. And that is kind of something that I agree with very wholeheartedly. Because I mean, it's been very hard for me to be into the fantasy you in the first place. but to kind of so getting away with it is something to me that makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But going back to the article, he does give 3 steps that he likes to do every time he starts making a general just uh background to his character or a role-playing persona in a way. The first step is considering, embracing, and defying stereotypes and archetypes, which is another thing that I like doing is playing
Yes.
against type.
Yes, I do too. It's very fun.
It's pretty great because you know the stereotypes. You have the blonde-haired, gorgeous man warrior running into battle with sword in hand. You're two-handed or one-handed, and he's the hero of the story. You have uh, the female mage who has long gowns and can destroy anybody with just the thoughts. And then you have
The skeeving rogue who's, trying to steal everything and all they want is money.
right, and then finally the halfling with a certain ring, and he doesn't know what to do with it.
But getting away from those is very funny. And so it's funny because when you mentioned the mage, obviously all I can think of is my famed character, Sephirin, who I made specifically to kind of fight the idea of that stereotype of what kind of elves are. You think of an elven wizard, you think of somebody who's very knowledgeable. Oh, I don't care about those things. I am an intelligent man. No, he was just a bat on a hell crazy necromancer who was so obsessed with death that the first time he met anybody would give them some type of random fact about death.
Oh yeah, he was great to play with. I'm not gonna lie, because we can always trust him to be like, did you know that the body decomposes after, what was it, 3 weeks?
Oh, I don't remember off the top of my head. I can't remember off the top of my head all the facts, but there was definitely the problem with I had a website that I would pull up every week, and I would just have ready whenever I was playing Sephirin. But like half of the stuff on that website were all stuff with like like in this war, this amount of people died or stuff like that, and I was like, well, that I can't use. I can't talk about World War I in a fantasy D&D setting. But that was the thing. It was really funny. I have another character that I have planned that's kind of similar in the vein of Sephirin, but in a way to me that's more sustainable.
Mhm.
Than Sephirin was. The problem with Sephirin and his like crazy necromancy was, that was not that it actually made him somebody you couldn't talk to, because that was the one thing. It just made it separated him so much from a family that was created due to rolling on the backgrounds chart in Xanathars that he just kind of became really sad to play, especially then his lack of health. So I have a character in just the waiting wings for one day that
One
I would
day.
love to play, especially in more of a fantasy setting. But I really want to play that's kind of like Sephirin, but is a little better to work with overall.
And to give another example,
Sephirin 2.0, if you will.
yeah, to give another example, I in short little like tirade here, I played a half orc, forge cleric, really
Yes.
nice guy, Lycus. However, he was what I called a green fighter, and it wasn't because he was actually green, was because he had just started out adventuring.
Right.
So the
So he
minute
was
he got,
level 1 when you made him?
yes, it
Okay.
was for Adventures League.
Ah, okay.
And the minute he started combat, immediately started crying and just flailing the mace around. This
Stop!
he wasn't short either. He was this 6 foot imposing figure of a half orc
Yeah.
who just couldn't handle combat. And he's
Uh.
now level 3, and he has a tiny bear, a miniaturized shrunken bear named Blood Drinker. And it's so great because he acts like a pup. But anyways.
But again, it's just breaking stereotypes again.
Exactly.
You think
It's
of half
so much
orcs, you
fun.
think of people who are built to fight, and then you have this blubbering cleric who's just like, goblins.
Already in the feet up section, just swinging from there, somehow making himself a worse target for the archers, and it works out really well. Everything was accidental, and I love this guy.
That's what makes it. Yeah, no.
But that's the thing for stereotypes and also archetypes. Marshall, can you think of any archetypes right now off the top of your head?
Well, I guess I'm unsure what I guess you mean by archetypes, just like roles or
In a way, yes, yes. Like in the way that clerics are always considered healers or paladins
yes.
are always the nice guys. We talked about
Um,
this before in past podcasts.
yeah, one that's always a really classic one, that especially in this edition really kind of obviously went downhill, like became much and much less of a really clear thing. But the idea that rangers were always the bow person,
Yes.
that's something that was funny because they've always had things built into their kits for a number of editions to allow them to use things like melee weapons effectively. Like in 3.5, the only class that could inherently dual wield was the ranger.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you had to take the feat. And it inevitably became like you had to take like up to 3 feats, I think, to actually do it properly. In 3.5, or 2 or 3, I don't remember the exact number, but you definitely, if you weren't a ranger, you had to take multiple feats to really get into a good spot with 2 weapon fighting.
Right.
Whereas, like, rangers, it was really easy for them to do. But the thing was, they were always meant, or their archetype was always they're the bow person, they're
Right.
the archer, they're a ranger. It's in their name.
Except for one certain ranger drow, who's very popular. I don't know. He has some nonsensical.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. I think he's the one that has the most known for dual wielding. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I just know he likes cats. But other than that.
but anyway, but yeah, that's a very classic way, like very classic like archetype.
It's
with
not to mention, like we mentioned before, the barbarian who's a tribal. Like in the book, it heavily emphasizes that yes, like barbarians, you're most likely from a tribe here, but I've repeatedly used the example of a family man who just has had it
well,
with life.
we had the our good friend John ran his character Charles.
Oh yes.
So he was a noble barbarian. So he would rage and like tear a shirt, but it was a shirt of mending, so it would just repair itself.
Oh yeah.
Because he can't just have a torn shirt. That would be barbaric. But anyway, but that's the funny thing was that he played a character that obviously was meant to kind of almost defy the archetype
Yes.
of somebody who, because he was also the one that did the most talking.
Oh yeah.
He was kind of, in a way, he was kind of the leader. Making like in the sensible leader. So like when everybody else is doing just crazy crap, he was talking to like the mayor of a town. Now it doesn't mean he never did crazy crap.
No, I believe he kept jumping on windows.
Not only that, but also like I think he smashed the corpse of our like gnome who died in a cave. Oh no! What he did, he like Gronk spiked his head because he like voodooed his head.
Yes.
Or not voodoo? Is it voodoo head? Or is it
A shrunk?
Yeah,
Did
the shrunken head.
Yeah, it's a shrunk.
Was that a voodoo culture thing?
I
I don't remember.
We're just gonna agree.
I don't remember which culture did that.
Yeah.
But essentially, yeah, he did a shrunken head and like Gronk spiked. So he had his crazy outburst, sure, but that's just the nature of, I think, the player partly.
True.
Hard to fight that. But in general, though, he still was probably one of the most sensible. That whole party was insane. Because that was the party that Zephyrin was in.
That's true.
And you had gone, and you were definitely well gone by that point.
That's fair.
You
Yeah.
had gone to training.
I was off to be completely insane.
Because otherwise, his character, Adney, was
Dead.
the most sane.
Ironically, since he had died before.
I mean, not to say you didn't have quirks, but you were still sane.
That's true.
Comparably.
But yeah, and we've mentioned before that the best things about 5e is that we can go whichever route we want.
Yeah, and that's what's really like why this article is actually really nice and helpful, and why it's good to listen to this podcast specifically is because you are actually getting you're getting a very basic level of just like how to do things, but it's because you can just do so much stuff on your own now. It's really good. Some people may be turned off by that.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the people you've played with in the past that we mentioned on podcasts.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, it's what's made it been very easy to get into the game as of like this last year. More and more people playing the game and whatnot, and it shows, I think, because of it being a more accessible game,
That's true. And
but not
plus,
overly accessible like 4E was.
and the article does explain about some social stereotypes in the game, in the lore particularly, that might be detrimental, or not detrimental, harmful to like the tabletop experience. Um, Primarily, it doesn't explicitly say it, but like elves and orcs,
Yeah.
the age-old rivalry.
Yes.
Rivalry. On a table, if you have a elven character and then even a half-orc character, and they're playing to their races really well, and it's getting to the point where they're just throwing insults at each other, that could just take away from everything.
Yeah, and it could spill off to more stuff, and that can make the game, less fun to play. And that's not something you ever want. You don't want to have that type of experience.
So it's a balance in a way of being able to grab whatever you want to do. You break the stereotype and whatnot. And if you want to be the orc that loves elves or the elves that only bangs orcs, go for it.
Or I mean, even then you
2019.
could even then you can get to the level where it's like, hey, if you don't like orcs, like that's cool, but you can do two routes. You can just do the like, I choose to deal with them
Yeah.
type of thing, or you maybe just think of them like, oh, well, they're a half orc, so only part of their heritage is bad. I'm just gonna assume it was due to some unnatural thing. Those damn orcs.
He probably hates them as much as I do.
Yeah, like that you could run to that, and maybe if then it turns out it's not true, maybe he had a loving orc father.
Oh yeah.
Then like, or mother, then that's like okay.
Yeah.
Then you maybe react, but maybe you've gotten to know them by that point that you're kind of like, well, he's not bad. I'll let my racism go slightly a little bit.
That's true.
It's
And
you can play with it, but I think it is important to try to keep in mind the player experience
yes.
and how that just by like if you attempt to go all out on the player experience, you definitely can get in your own way very easily.
Mm-hmm. But I do want to see that elf that only bangs orcs. Orc Banger 2019. Let's do this.
Orc Banger.
The second step that he says is creating or consciously refusing to create a backstory. Now, this one is a very interesting one because I know you have thoughts about this.
Well, so what do you? So I guess this is the part I didn't get to. So what does he exactly mean about like refusing to create? Just like not writing it down, or
Pretty much, you don't need a backstory unless you do. By which he means you don't need a full fleshed out backstory, unless you really want things to be explored in the game. And it depends. This also is depending on the DM that you have.
yeah. I mean it's kind of interesting because I mean I like to have a lot of backstory for
Mhm.
characters. I'm not great at writing it down all the time. A lot of times I write it down in like other ways. Like if anything, I'll write down, like I've written just like docs in the past, so
Yeah.
it's just like a short story.
All the times you've handed me a napkin with just ideas like, hey, is this okay?
Well, and to be fair, that's just from building the character in general. Like that's like me trying to do certain things that are just different.
Oh, yeah.
Which will become apparent later. But that's the thing is at least for now it's like in general though when I make most of my characters I do like to have as much of a backstory as I can. The one I'm playing right now on our Friday campaign here is probably the one I've had the least amount of backstory for, just because I guess partly because I kind of had to come up with the character pretty quick, but also just kind of because I kind of like the idea that she really didn't do much up until she like met with this group, and that was the thing since we didn't. A lot of her backstory then was kind of and hinging on whatever this group that we were going into had done.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know that. I didn't feel like it was my point to kind of just decide for everybody, like, all right, we did all these things just because I say so. Like, I don't want to do that. So that was the one scenario where I kind of chose to not make much of one.
Yeah.
The only other times I choose not to is if I don't plan to play the character for long.
Mm-hmm.
So like on our Thursday campaign, he doesn't really have a backstory. I just have character traits, and that's it, because I don't plan to play him more than maybe 3 times. So in that realm, I'm not concerned.
Oh yeah. So in the article, you pretty much just defined the 2 separate groups that he was explaining in the article. They loosely based like paragraphs worth of like, after his family got destroyed by the hurricane, this person went off and became a ranger along the coastline. And that's it. That's all. And then you have the longer, more extravagant one that you can give to your DM and be like, Ryan Finkelbottom is a gnome crafter from so-and-so who, after a long day of being ignored by his fellow clansmen, left to pursue his own dreams. On this day, he did, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
The benefit to having that one, it gives your DM things to harken back to, things to reference throughout the campaign. Like, say, it's like, you guys are going towards Finkelbottom's birthplace, and then the character's like, oh my god.
Why'd you bring me here?
Exactly. You have those moments.
Yeah.
But it also kind of makes it a little bit more directed towards one character once you start doing that, unless you do it really great, in which you're like, this character's arch enemy isn't that character's birthplace. So now you got 2 interlocking storylines.
Mm-hmm.
The benefits of the loose backstory, though, if you can call it that, or just a little like summary of what they are, is that the player is given the liberty to continue on and make up the backstory as they go, appropriately to the campaign, of course. But they could be like, we go to this town. It's like, I've been here before. I went to that tavern, had a few drinks. Other than that, it's a pretty nice town. And most of the time, most things will be like, yes, you were there.
Or that, or the other scenario that I get to is the, so for example, one thing that I have to word this carefully, because the sad part is, by the time this episode comes out, this will be relevant, or this will be relevant information potentially.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's not. So I'm wording this as carefully as I can. But at least going into like our next week, into our next week now, when we're recording this, Shadows of an Empire episode. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Don't worry. The
The
human body.
so they very much the funny thing is, so he's giving me, the person I'm planning on having kind of do like a check on certain things. He's known like he made his backstory very, very wide, or like very set. Like he did like the whole thing. Like he's created a story for this character, and this character had like a life, and he is set to go. But then there are things I've been able to kind of add to that. So since he kind of created his own almost country and world,
yes,
outside of the one that I gave, and then kind of was like, and then he came to the world that you made, essentially. Yes. The idea. And so what's funny is it actually gave me the ability to play with that, because while he made that part pretty clear, it kind of since it's an entire world, I can kind of play with that. So some of the things I've actually had the benefit of, and actually, Kristoff is the character Kristoff is actually a good point to this, is that some of the things have been added into D&D, I've actually been able to use this foreign country as a medium to kind of showcase, because like, hey, these things don't exist in Dern and Delara, but they exist in this third country that Kristoff and technically Tarek are from.
Yes.
So like, hey, they remember these things from when they were there, and then they're like, oh, how did those get here? Like, and like suddenly, like I can kind of use them as these piecings together when I want to introduce these newer things that maybe, so like if I wanted to introduce, like if I was kind of just like, oh, that's a changeling. Or, oh, wow, we haven't really seen those in this. Those are new. I never really heard of those.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, maybe like certain people are like aware of like you can because you one things you can do in terms of world building is you can have the idea of like this country has Kalashtar, but they don't know that they're Kalashtar. They just think they're humans. Whereas in this other country, they do know that and they're aware, and they like and they're kind of aware of that and have workings within that in society.
Sort of like
So you can kind of play with those things.
yeah, so like one country they're regarded highly, and the other country they think they're insane. They hear
Exactly.
voices in their
And
head.
so by having, him by having kind of this very detailed story, I was able to kind of be able to pull that in and use that as a way to pull in. And actually, because of him having that, that's how I was able to pull Kristoff in the first place.
Yeah.
I've been trying to find a way to have that story, like part of his backstory, come out into play it throughout the campaign, but it's hard. How do I get somebody from another country to come into the world that I've created? That right now they're in a very locked off country.
Mhm.
They're very much in a North Korea like country where you can't come or leave, and how do I do that? Well, somebody technically is trading with the country still.
True.
There is maybe a way in, and bada bing bada boom, when I had to put in Kristoff, I found my answers, and I was able to create the story answer of, his lover having missed him, been still believing that he is somewhere and just needs to be, found. Maybe he's in trouble. And so she enlisted in Kristoff to maybe go off. She heard rumors about an entrancing bard, foreign bard in a land called Dern. And so she, went off and sent him. And he got stuck there, but inevitably did find Talric. And
Yes.
now we're in the situation we're in the campaign. And so that's what's interesting is because doing such a very finite backstory, I've been able to play with that too.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with either one. There's
No,
obviously
I mean
pros
I've
and cons.
definitely done both.
Yeah. And
Multiple
to
times.
give a small example for the contrary, the loose one, the character for this campaign, the Friday campaign, his name is Finn. He's the one-armed barbarian that I played. We encountered a pixie recently. And while they were all like, "Do you know what this is?" And I rolled a natural 20 on my, I believe it was nature check. And I told them, "Yes, I fought one before. I lost that one." And they're like, "How did you lose a fight to the pixie?" Listen, I was 10 and they got my eyes.
You fight the pixie. How you fight a pixie? I mean, if you're going by the pixie player race rules that exist out there,
They're absolutely terrifying.
then it's pretty much like losing. It's technically like losing a fight to a normal person, really.
Yeah.
Depends on it all. Everything. What matters is what their ability scores are. I just, for some reason, found the one pixie with a 20 on their ability score.
But yeah, the reason why we're going so much into this is because in the article itself, it's most people find themselves in the middle of wanting to have that amount of information, but also not wanting to write too much. So it's really just a matter of what you guys want to do for what gets you into that character in a way. If you need the long story to know this character and be like, he's gonna react to this in this situation, go for it. Do that. If you need the loose one so you can play with it later, or as the campaign goes on, where you can add in elements that will benefit to the campaign and to your party and to you in general, go for that. If you already use one or the other, try the other one. Maybe that will help you out a little bit. And that's the point he makes in this. But he also goes into some other minor details in this topic, primarily like your social status. Like, is your character a noble? Has he been impoverished his entire life? We talked about this with
Backstories.
with backstories
Or the backgrounds.
yeah, and the noble barbarian.
Yes.
How that affected how he was. His homeland. We also talked about that.
Yeah,
It
it
was-
came up very prominently too.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I think a lot of people it's I think fun for a lot of people to try to play like the rich character who maybe like doesn't understand the world, so they think like, oh, I'm gonna be this big bad adventure, and then they get their ass kicked or whatever.
Exactly.
That they realize like, wow, things are really hard, and like it's a good story to make. But the one thing that you have to realize is like when you pick a noble, like nobles mean something.
Yeah.
Nobles are well known. They get recognized likely, because in the world of D&D is not like real medieval times where, you know, sure, you may, if you were a noble in one area, that's really cool. The moment you leave there, nobody knows who the hell you are.
Pretty much. But
So whereas in D&D, likely like fame does travel because there's magic and there's greater chances of travel.
oh
I
yeah,
mean, you know, the entirety of what you can see on the maps that are on the lines of the Walian walls here, you know, these obviously didn't exist, but because these are magical fantasy worlds, these giant cities exist in these countries that are the size of countries today, you know, can exist because they are allowed that function. So if you pick a noble, it's can be interesting because you should kind of maybe realize like and play with the fact that like people may know you, people may be interested in or kiss your ass or
that's true.
you know want your money, even though maybe you're not carrying all of the money. They're gonna assume that you have money, especially if you dress nicely.
In reality, you might not. You might not. And which goes
Right.
into the next topic, which is also your family, which is another one of these subtopics, like your
Yeah.
relationship to your family.
Mhm.
In the past campaign we did with your necromancer
Mhm.
wizard
Oh,
and my
that's what again. That's like I said. That's what made it sad. Was I rolled when I rolled for kind of his "This is your life" table from Xanathar's. You know, I rolled that he had gotten married and had a kid. Well, I was planning on playing this insane dude. You know, so the idea that it's like, well, I guess how do I get to the point where, you know, he had a family? Well, I guess he just must have been sane once and then got insane,
yeah.
and suddenly it's kind of like, oh, now it's because eventually, like when they would be around, it was like, man, this is just kind of sad.
Yeah, it changed the genre for that character from comedy to tragedy, where this character that's actually a respected wizard fell into slight lunacy from
Mhm.
pursuing what he loved, and he lost some people along the way. And
Yeah.
that makes for great stories.
It was for a great story. I mean, I probably would have been more confident in attempting to push that character had he not fail so much on surviving in general.
You just rolled
Um,
poor stats, that's why.
Oh yeah, I like if I had better stats, that character probably could have been a little better. But I also feel like the type of insanity he had was hard to resustain. Because the idea is if anything, you want to have because my attempt was I was trying to get him towards a redemption arc here, and the problem is I really couldn't get to it, and there's a lot of resistance getting to that, which made it very hard.
Yes. And then also, having family involved with this, everybody can relate with family. Everybody has that one uncle who gets a little bit too tipsy in parties, that one aunt who always has something to say, stuff like that. Generalization of what your family might have.
Right.
Everybody has siblings, or mostly everybody has siblings. Everybody has parents or parents that might be a little bit overdoting on them. In some things in your backstory, you can have these things, and they can make you not only relatable to you, this character relatable to you, but this character relatable to everybody else, and could just further work to the synergy of the party overall. It's one of the minor things that is there. And overall, we've been hinting at this topic. The final point is in his article, he writes down, what's my motivation? Why is the character out and about doing what they do? And I don't remember who said it, but there's this thing that's been going around on Twitter a couple of times where why would a character go out and put their lives in danger if they didn't have a tragic backstory? What are your thoughts about it?
So that's it. So to me, that's the interesting thing because I think it's really easy to answer why they would go out adventuring without having a tragic backstory. Because that's actually something I specifically try to avoid. I think because it's really easy to be like, oh, my parents died from monsters, so I had to devote my life to killing monsters. Or like, or like, I was forgotten, nobody cared about me, and then I decided to make people care, and I became blah 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 blah. Like I think it's really easy to try to make some like soppy story, and I see it a lot. And that's not to say that they're bad. And if you want to have a character with like a tragic backstory that's really serious, hell, I'm making one right now. Like it's you know that's the thing. But that's the thing. It's like you don't have to. And so for the most part, I try to avoid that. And it's the reason being is because I have a lot of fun really trying to just like being the very like somewhat of a counterpoint.
Yes.
Because I think in a lot of campaigns where it's like, oh my God, like so many like this bad thing happened to me, this bad thing happened to me. I don't know. I just sent a letter to my mom the other day. She said Uncle Stan is just doing super well. My cousin Melody just had a baby. That's really exciting. Oh, my dad just got promoted. It's been really interesting. Just like totally mellow, just like family, like oh, like I can't talk to my parents. Oh well, that's a really shame. My mom is a lovely person. Like just like super vanilla, and I love that because I love having that. I love having the, I guess you could say like the duality in like parties of just like two juxtaposed character ideas where it's like dark and grimy, overly bright. And the reason, and so like a lot of times the reasons that I come up with those types of characters to want to become adventurers is because they either are struck with wanderlust, they want to travel, or, maybe they have that one they have that one kink in their brain that's just like, I really like fighting. It's like, sure, they have that's the thing. It's like, why would you become a wrestler? Or like, why would you want to become a wrestler or whatever? Right. Like, you're putting your body in harm. You're attempting to do something really physically dangerous or whatever. Well, it's because you like the art of wrestling, and so the idea is like maybe this person just really likes the art of combat,
right?
And so like they like were part of a fencing thing and they really liked that, and the only way that they could do something with that obviously is to become an adventurer. And in most worlds there's no shame being an adventurer.
Yeah.
So the idea of being an adventurer is also kind of alluring because it's like, I liked fighting. It was really cool. Maybe you're like your cleric, your orc, your half-orc. Maybe they don't understand fully what that entails, but it just at least maybe they're fantasized by this idea. Maybe it changes when they get there, or maybe it doesn't. But you don't. I would heartily disagree with the idea that you would definitely have to have a bad backstory to really put your life in danger. Especially just some people have that sense of like, I guess not nobility, but
like
the word
to help people.
Yeah,
like,
the word is escaping me.
It's starting to escape me too. Just overall goodness of being able to want to go around and just help the general populace.
Right. Yeah.
Heroic ambition. There we go. We'll go with that.
Yeah. Sure.
Well, yes, that would be the thing. And like I said, Lycus didn't really have a particular bad tragic backstory. He's one day like, I want to become an adventurer because they sound so great and they tell me all these stories. So he sold the forge that he just acquired, bought armor, went off, then ended up being stuck in Chult fighting off velociraptors.
At least they're small.
Yeah.
Battle away.
But they're still bloody.
It's when they're in packs.
Oh, that's true. Pack tactics.
Clever girl.
Pack tactics, DMs. Use pack tactics to its fullest. I'm sorry.
Table.
Yes. I got really excited there.
Clever girl.
Exactly. So we just gave you two little things: the tragic backstory argument, and then the just regular like you don't need to have one, and that's true. And that's a fun thing about Dungeons and Dragons. You can go either or.
Yeah, you don't have to be that detailed. Like especially us, like we really like to hammer up this idea of like, oh, like the backstory is so interesting. Develop your characters, but like, in the end, like really, you could just be like, yeah, I'm just here. It really depends on just how interested, like how much interest you feel like you want or need to put into it. Mm-hmm. If you feel like that you just want, like, I just want to play a tactical game, I want to fight and maybe just have a little bit of RPG just because it's fun.
Yeah.
Just fun to talk to NPCs, mess with them, do whatever, like that type of, but you don't want to worry about like, like, I don't know. I don't really want to think about like what my character came from, who they are, like what their family is like. Oh, they're like, oh, they have got 8 siblings. Like, and then what are the names of all those siblings? And do they have families? Like, I don't want to think about that. I just want to roll dice and slay mobs and then try to woo the waitress at the bar and then woo the waiter because I swing both ways.
Exactly.
It's just like, you can do whatever way you want it.
Yeah, motivations are great in
Mhm.
that sense, and they do feel to how your character interacts with the people around them. Like it's very different for a character who wants to help the world from like a recent disease. They're
Mhm.
like, hey guys, you need any help and all that?
Yeah.
Do you need like healing, any herbs? Against a guy who's like, I want to go home to my family. It's like, where can I find a carriage? Please just get me over there. Those things. Different motivations call for different characters, and it becomes obvious. Even if you just write down they want to hunt down this creature, or this certain creature, and will do anything to do so. There you have a potentially either a character that will work with other people in order to do this, or a character that'll be like, we need to do this my way, and then go off and do the thing.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a big difference between background and like motivation.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I think every character needs some type of motivation because otherwise, then you really aren't. Because like you're not going to do things like inherently, you're really not going to do things like wooing an employee of a bar or or attempting to slay moblin folk without some type of motivation. Really, it may just be similar to your player motivation, but it's a motivation nonetheless, and it's what your character has. And we've also often just had that discussion where like if you totally just disconnect yourself from the game, well, then you're really obviously not really giving you're not giving the game really a fair chance, and B, you're not giving yourself a fair chance at being able to enjoy playing the game. So, but having motivation is very key because you really want to be able to kind of put yourself out there and just kind of be able to make your decisions based off of something, not just pure randomness.
And not to mention, motivations can change all the time. A background can't, or a backstory can't.
Right. And yeah, if you want to change your motivations, you totally can do that.
Yeah, it's very easy. Like if something were to happen to the party itself, and like say a character got really injured, and you guys need to heal, or you guys had to do this elaborate quest in order to heal them, your motivation from then on would be, I want to make sure none of my none of my party members have to suffer the same way I had to suffer if you were the one who had that happen.
Yeah.
Or if the campaign continues forward and you are that new adventurer who just wants to experience battle and you've already seen battle and you're like, this sucks. Why do people have to go through this? I don't want people to go through this. Suddenly their motivation now is to protect people from the reality of that, to stop people who are like him to become.
I protest the Adventurers League. No to Adventurers League.
Exactly.
Don't be me.
Motivations, as we said, are very fluid into whatever you want to be. A backstory is more cemented.
Yeah.
So whichever one we highly I'm getting my words tied right now. Whatever you want to do, we highly recommend that you pay special attention to your motivation, just because that can then just lead to everything else in reality.
Yeah, I mean that exact thing is what happened to Sephirin. Was he at some point after he just his whole idea, the basis of his character, since obviously most people may not know this, the idea was him being an elf, but him knowing a lot of more humanoid aged people. He grew up in a family of tieflings, so he some of which mysteriously never passed on. There's a whole thing about that, but that's a digression. But the idea is obviously he was around a number of people that he has outlived. Like, he has outlived a large number of people, and my idea was, what does that do to you mentally? And the idea was that it kind of seemed to bother him.
Yeah.
And then so when he had a kid, suddenly the idea was, well, he suddenly came to realize realization that he didn't want his kid to have to kind of view that same type of thing. So his idea was to utilize necromancy and try to find the source for immortality. And that's what inevitably drove him insane, blah blah blah. But then eventually, now we fast forward, a couple of his party members were almost killed and brought back to life, but like, that affected him because he realized like, man, like this is really hard. Like, and I don't know how possible this is, or like, I'm not doing anything to help keep people alive as much as I've studied now for so long. And that's the thing is, and then him almost dying just got to the point where it's just like, man, I'm just like, I was like, I can't do this. I have to be, the best thing I can do is make myself stronger and try essentially to claw his way back to sanity, almost by using insanity still. Because essentially his way of his consciousness coming back was him believing that there was some celestial inhabiting his mind. It was just his consciousness. Like, just being like,
hey there,
hey,
buddy.
maybe I shouldn't do that. Who's saying this?
Hey there, buddy. It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah,
we don't talk much.
But then, so, like I said, the idea was him kind of clawing back into sanity, so that, because then his new motivation was that he wanted to be able to see his family again, be able to kind of get it back. And that was kind of his new motivation, and that's because of things that happened in the campaign. So like as you go through and realize certain things, you may change certain aspects.
Oh yeah.
Still miss him.
Yeah, he was a great character. And just to give one more example to this plethora of examples we've been giving off, my girlfriend Celeste is playing this one tiefling druid, Simone, who you played with her. Her main defining, every time she finishes a sentence like, I do this gaily. Which is a fun little thing where she's like, she would be like, she's just standing there gaily, or it's like, she's just there in all gayness. You can have fun with this. There's no...
Yeah, no, she's very good. Celeste is very good at making like super quirky characters that have just like, and that just have like an interesting quirk. Okay, an unknown person that asked not to be mentioned, making signs at us. I said unknown. No, but she is really good at making these quirky characters. Damn it, I forgot. What was her last character's name?
Her last character? Which one?
In Riv.
Oh, Philippe.
Yeah, Philippe was very, he was all flamboyant.
Yeah,
but
flamboyant noble.
Yeah, but also like really, I don't want to say innocent. Innocent is not the right word, but just like very endearing.
Yes. Naive comes to mind.
Yeah, and so it was really great because you just meet people and just like, she would just have him meet people and just be instantly friends with them. Like when it was so great for my character when I got thrown into that, because like it was just like everybody in that campaign saw my character, and like the entire time they're just like, the hell are you doing? I missed the first attack I go for, I missed the shot. And that's the only time a turn I got in that entire encounter. So I only got one chance to do damage in this encounter. And for some reason, I'm just like, oh, well, why don't you hit somebody in an attack? Like, I got one chance. I'm sorry, I'm not a fighter who can have 6 attacks in a turn if I really want to.
Looking at the 2 fighters who had 6 attacks in a turn if they really wanted to.
Like, it's just like, what do you want from me? Huh? What do you want from me?
But that goes, that is partly the shortcomings of the Artificer, which is a topic for another podcast.
Well, even a number of classes don't get extra attacks and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's the more of the thing was that's just what fighter is meant to do. But that's the thing. It's like, and small digression, I guess, but we're pretty much just filling for time at this point. So the big thing though is that like with fighters, like, so that's the thing is, I think if I remember correctly, Jade's character who plays Jet in Shadows of an Empire, I think he dual wielded like crossbows or something.
He did the one hand sword and then the other, or one rapier and then crossbow combination.
Yeah, so like he kind of would every now and then kind of almost utilize dual wielding for the
Yes.
benefit, and that's the thing. It's like, okay, well, where's your bonus action then? And it's like, guess what? Bonus action, cantrip, haha, suck it. Like or like healing word. Guess what? I can do this. Bonus action, healing word. Can you do that? I didn't think so. Yeah, like so. There's obviously benefits to not, having 6 attacks in one turn. It's true, you're not doing all of the damage, but I can also do other things.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, and that's the thing. It's like I had a gun, but B, it's like I could also just if that campaign I was given more opportunity because we didn't meet too much.
Yes.
To do things that included like alchemy and like needing potions or whatever, like immediately him as an artificer would have made a bunch of benefit.
That's true.
Like he would have had a ton of benefit, but we never got to that point.
No, unfortunately, I
so
left.
unfortunately, yeah. So unfortunately, like the 2 or 3 sessions that I was in, only one of them really I had like a decent encounter because that one's the only one that lasted more than 1 round.
That's true. That's true. But yes,
I think it's the one. That's my one thing with 5e is I feel like it's very hard to have long-standing encounters
well, to be
that aren't bosses.
That's fair. And I mean, it was also partly to my inexperience as a DM because I was DMing for that.
Yeah.
But now I'm better. We'll see how it goes.
We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. But yes, so to summarize the article, there's 3 steps again for those who are interested in interacting with this. Words did not come out of my mouth for that straight second of just dead air. I hope you enjoyed that. The 3 steps again that Mr. Hayek wants you to use, or at least what the ones he used for his characters, is considering, embracing, and defining stereotypes and archetypes, creating and consciously refusing to read a backstory, and based on the above, determining the motivation of the characters. In reality, though, you can do it whatever way you want. We're only shouting into the void, wanting to give you as many pointers as you can to make your D&D experience a lot better.
Yes, exactly. Don't listen to us, but listen to us.
Just pick and choose, just like how 5e is. You can pick and choose.
Yeah, pick and choose what you want to listen to, just like everybody does every day with the news.
Right? Vaccines.
Exactly.
Now, Marshall, do you have any final words you want to say about this topic at the very least?
Yes. For those who are the children of... Okay, I'm not even going to go to that meme. I was going to make the classic anti-vax children meme, but I decided to go against it. Yeah. No, honestly, my big thing is just... I think the best part about kind of defining the idea of like... to me, it was more about like... I think when you try to break the idea of certain archetypes or stereotypes is, I think, a great way to like really get a motivation to a character. Playing an insane Eladrin was definitely one of the most fun I've had, and my potential sequel to that, I really want to do one day, and I'm excited to. But there are definitely plenty of like ways I think to work around certain things. I was debating we were planning on doing a low magic campaign in our Thursday group at some point in the future. And one of the things we were looking at was, I thought it'd be really interesting. He mentioned being a race called the Kitsune. And I could just essentially be from the Eastern land, and somehow I traveled more towards the Western European side of things.
As Kitsunes do.
So the idea, though, I was thinking for a while, I was kind of thinking at first, like, maybe it would be interesting if I was something like a big fighter or like a samurai. Because you think of something like Kitsune, you think of something that is like sneaky or very stealthy. It doesn't. But the idea of just being in like big samurai armor with like.
I'm just imagining a Kurama, Naruto, like Sasuke and Naruto having a bro hug, and then purple armor coming on the giant fox. Continue.
I'm not familiar, I'm sorry. But it was just the idea of just being somebody who, like, because if you think of most Kitsune, most of the time you think of something that is not a very armored type of character.
Yes.
And then so playing something like that would have been very interesting to me. I decided to go more, though, back to the the roguish archetype, but I'm still going to have fun with it. But that was the thing. It's like I was very tempted to go in that route because of the idea of, I guess, like breaking a stereotype just
Yes.
is always interesting to me. I think it helps really give a lot of motivation.
It's always fun, and you're right to think that. You're safe
Why?
here.
What were your last thoughts? Huh?
I already gave my last thoughts.
Well,
No,
okay.
no, other than that, just this. You can do it your way. There's no ways the right way.
You can
have
it
your way.
No, don't bring it up.
There's many resources that can help you get into character if that's your problem. If you need help making backstories, there's also many other things out there. We can go into something about writing an actual backstory, like go into more detail in the topic in a future podcast.
It could be like me and be a huge nerd and get journal books from
Yes.
bookstores that look all fancy and fantasy-like.
That's true. But yes, we just want to give a special thanks to James Hayek for writing this great article.
Oh, heck.
Yeah, he's the lead writer for D&D Beyond, co-author of Waterdeep Dragon Heist and the Critical Role Tal'Dorei campaign setting. Now, enough of me fellatiating the article writer.
That's a great way to end this podcast.
Yes, and one more thing. Thank you again to Lake Geneva Games for allowing us to film at their sites. Lake Geneva Games, if you want to get your gaming on.
I can tell you practice this line.
We'll work on it. But thank you.
We'll work on it.
Thank you to those at Lake Geneva Games for allowing us to be here.
Yes. And you may see them more in-depthly on this channel in the future. Stay tuned for that.
Yes, if they don't take offense to what I tried to do.